What's the fastest way to improve your 5K? If you say that it's to improve your fitness, train better, train longer, more consistency, better workouts, then you're probably right. But when you get down to a week before your race, or even the day before your race, or even the day of your race, what is it that you can do in order to improve your performance? Now, in this video, I'm gonna go into 4 things that you can do even on race day before the gun goes off that's gonna improve your 5K time or any distance that's relatively short, from the mile, 5K, or 10K. Ready? Let's go. Okay, there's something that really we have to get out of the way before we jump into this, and that is your pacing. Now, on race day, if you pace your race inappropriately, meaning that you're going out way too fast or way too slow, then it's really gonna sabotage the time that you can run. So if you wanna learn more about pacing, this is really one of the biggest things that you can do. I've got a video that takes you through how to master your pacing right here, but assuming that you're pacing it relatively well, these are the things that are going to improve your performance. Now, number 1, this is gonna be the biggest one, and we're gonna kind of go the biggest ones and then shorter and shorter as we go. The most important one is heat. Now, you're probably aware that if you run a race when it's blazing hot outside, that you're gonna run slower. Now, if it's also really cold, that might inhibit your performance too. But why is it that when it's hot outside, we run slower? Well, your core body temperature goes up, but also the temperature of your local muscles that are contracting in your legs when you're running a race, they go up just because you're moving, and when it's hot outside, they'll go up even more. Now, this increase in temperature is really critical for our performance. If your core body temperature goes up high enough, your body is gonna die. And your body doesn't want you to die, so your brain is gonna shut you down. You get hotter and hotter and hotter, and then we get heat illnesses. You've probably heard of heat stroke before. Yeah, that's your body shutting you down, preventing you from doing any more movement so that you stop, you lay down, and you cool down. Now, you're probably not gonna get heat stroke, I hope. If it's that hot, maybe you just don't run. But the local muscle temperature in your quads, in your calves, in all of the muscles you're using to run, the temperature of these muscles goes up and up and up as you go from sitting to walking to jogging to running hard, running fast. And that's why we're talking about this for shorter distance races, because in a marathon or an ultra marathon, yeah, you're contracting your muscles, but less intensely than in a short distance race. So this muscle temperature increase is gonna happen the most in the middle distance and the short distance events. Now, when your muscle temperature starts going up, there's a problem. And that problem is enzymes, metabolic enzymes. So an enzyme is a protein, and as temperature increases, those proteins, they start to denature. They have a structure to them, and they'll lose that structure as they get hotter and hotter and hotter. This is one of the reasons why if you cook your food above about 114 degrees Fahrenheit, that you're gonna start to lose enzymes and proteins. Same thing in your body. When the temperature goes up, these enzymes don't work quite as well. And we need these enzymes for things like aerobic metabolism. If you wanna make energy when you're running, you've gotta keep your body cool enough so that your metabolic processes can work as they should. Now, I'm gonna share something pretty interesting with you. In the NFL, there was a bunch of research that was done a number of years ago on taking athletes and having them do as many dips as they can, or as many pull-ups as they can in a certain amount of time. Now, the athletes who participated, they would do as many as they could on day 1. They would then come back and they would do it again after they had rested, and they would do something called palmar cooling. It's putting your hands in cool, not cold, but just cool water. And what that does is it dumps heat out of your body. But why the hands? Why not just put a cool rag around your neck or a cool hat on? The answer is because when we look at the kinds of blood vessels that we have in our body, we go from big to small back to big. So when blood leaves your heart, it goes into an artery. Artery is really big. And then that artery, as it travels through your body, turns into an arteriole. That is a little bit less of a diameter. And then the arteriole turns into a capillary. And a capillary is where exchange of oxygen and nutrients happens. Then after you use up the oxygen and the nutrients in your blood, they go back to the heart and they go into a bigger venule and then a vein, and then it returns to the heart. So it goes from big to small back to big. Now, this is really important because heat exchange is really bad in the capillaries. At the surface of our skin, we have mostly capillaries, and those diameters of those blood vessels are really small, so it's really hard to exchange heat. So we can't dump heat out of our body very easily. But if we could get access to the arteries or the veins, if we could get those closer to the skin, we're gonna be able to release heat into the environment much more quickly. But we're not gonna change our blood vessel structure. There is something you can do though. You have special blood vessels throughout your body called AVAs. Now these exist in the part of your face that doesn't have hair on it. So basically your face, the palms of your hands, and the soles of your feet. Now, these blood vessels, they're much wider. They're kind of like that arterial and the venule. We kind of skip the capillary. And so in these places in our body, we can dump heat out of our body very rapidly. So one of the keys to being able to reduce your local muscle temperature and your core body temperature when you're doing exercise is to dump heat out of these areas. Now, in that NFL study, they had players come back and do as many diffs as they could again, but this time, between every other set that they were doing, they had them cool their palms. And they were able to do 6 times as many dips. That's a 600% improvement just from cooling and dumping heat out of the local muscles. Okay, but that's NFL players doing muscular fatigue. In your running, you're not doing dips, you're not doing curls, you're doing a little bit less intensity, but for longer. So how can you apply this to your running? Well, there's 2 applications of this. You can do this during interval training. So if you run an interval, say on a track, you do every 400 meters, and between each interval or every other interval, you can cool yourself. You can get some cool water on your palms and on your face. Now in a race, you're not likely to stop and cool your palms, but you can do something like right before your race goes off, you can do some palmar cooling. Now we see this in elite running, don't we? If you watch an elite marathon, I remember watching the Olympics this year, and coming out to the starting line, the runners are wearing cooling vests. And in the past, I had seen cooling vests used before, but recently at this Olympics, I saw them using palmar cooling as well. So this is something that elite athletes know about. Now in the track events, are they doing this? I honestly don't know, because they go warm up kind of off screen. They have a separate warm up area, and then they just come onto the track for their performance a minute or 2 before the gun goes off. But I would presume that they are using this. Now they're using this in the NFL and the NBA. I believe every NBA team now has a device where they put their hand into this contraption that circulates cool water. Now it costs a lot of money and it's largely unnecessary. You can do this just with some cool water. Now you don't want to use cold, because if it's cold, if it's ice cold, then you're going to constrict, you're going to vasoconstrict the blood vessels in your hands and on your face. And then you actually impede your ability to dump heat. So the key is that it has to be cool, but not cold. Now, how do you practice this in a race? I remember running a 50-mile race in the mountains on a really hot summer day, and there was a guy who was running ahead of me. He was beating me, but we'd get to an aid station, and I would take some ice, and I would swap it from left hand to right hand face, left hand, right hand face. So it's not freezing my hand, it's just cool. Hand, hand, face, hand, hand, face. And I would do that, and I'd hold the ice, and it would melt after about a mile or so. And I would catch the guy. We'd run together for a few miles, and then he'd start pulling away from me. And then we get to another aid station, I'd get the ice, and I'd catch him. So this was improving my performance. He said to me, he turned over his shoulder, and he said, "How do you keep catching me? I'm trying to drop you." And I told him about what I was doing. So at the next aid station, he started doing it, and then he ended up beating me in the race. So this can work for long distances as well, but in a short distance, you can use this. Instead of during the race, you use it right before. So that's hack number 1 for you. When it comes to getting your best training in and really peaking for your best race, you have to recover from these bigger workouts, these long runs. Now, nothing is gonna help your recovery more than proper nutrition and proper sleep. The easiest, simplest way is to get a sleep mask. Sleep masks are super useful, but you gotta get a good one. So I've got 4 sleep masks myself, and I found this brand called Manta Sleep, and they're really the best I've ever used. My channel is called Run Elite because I want to give you the best tips to make you as elite as you can be. So if you want to get better sleep, there's a lot of things that you can do, but let's take first steps first and maximize the sleep that you're already getting. And I want you to pick up one of these. Pick up any sleep mask that you like. Skip over all the ones that aren't that good and just get one that's really good, and then you'll have it for the rest of your life. So go to mantasleep.com and then put in code RUNELITE and you'll save 10%. It's pretty awesome. Back to the video. Hack number 2 is that you don't need to look any further than your own breath. Now, there's something else that happens metabolically when you start running and when you start running fast. And that is your metabolism can't really keep up with the energy demand. So if you're going nice and easy, I'm walking here out on this trail, I'm burning mostly fat because I have an abundance of oxygen because I don't need it. I'm not running hard. Now, as you start to run faster, you'll start to use less fat for metabolism and more sugar. And we store sugar as glycogen in our muscles and our liver. Now, you've probably heard of something called oxygen debt. And that just means that you're working anaerobically. You're running fast enough that the oxygen that you're breathing in isn't enough to efficiently metabolize and make new energy. So you have to go to anaerobic metabolism. And you're doing that in a mile, in a 5K. This is partially anaerobic. That's why you get really out of breath. What if you could get more oxygen in? And consequently, what if you could get more CO2 out? Now let's talk about CO2 for a second, because as an endurance runner, you're well aware that you need a lot of oxygen, but we're not as aware of what happens with CO2. There's some interesting research on CO2. Now, there's a YouTube channel that I really like called Vsauce. And what this guy does is explain different scientific concepts in really entertaining ways. I highly recommend his channel. And one of the findings from the research that he was reporting on was a study that was done on what evokes fear, what evokes a wanting to escape from any human and, in fact, any animal. Now, this happens in your running, doesn't it? Not just does your body get tired, but eventually we can't push anymore. It hurts too much. There's that pain that's associated with a short distance, like an 800 meter or a 5K, and it's that really acute punch in the face kind of pain that we don't experience in a marathon or an ultra. Those are more of a slow drip suffering. But in a short distance, it's like this rock concert going off in your brain, and you just are suffering and you have to grit your teeth and plow through. So that is a kind of pain that we're experiencing that we want to push through. So CO2 is one of the tools that you can use to minimize that kind of pain. Let me explain. Now, some people have fear of snakes or fear of heights or something like that, but not everybody. It is not ubiquitous across all humans. Some people, they could even have something missing in their brain or a deformity or genetic predisposition to where they can even touch a hot stove and they don't sense pain. So what is it that causes a panic or a pain inside of everybody, no matter what? And the answer is the accumulation of CO2. When we accumulate CO2, our body knows that we're about to die pretty quick. We're not getting oxygen. We're basically suffocating or drowning. And so suffocating or drowning are things that across the board, no matter who you are, these are things that our brain really desperately wants to avoid and will give us a fight or flight response if we start to experience it. So when you run, you are starting to go into oxygen debt and build up CO2. You're building up other things too, like hydrogen ions and lactic acid. By the way, lactic acid is not a problem. We want to have lactic acid as a fuel source, but we start to accumulate CO2. Now, this accumulation of CO2 will also shut you down when you're running your race. And that's when you feel this pain coming on and the lightheadedness and that tunnel vision, and you just drop down. So what if we could get rid of CO2? Now I'm going to share a technique with you right here where you can increase your oxygen and you can decrease your CO2 right before the gun goes off. And so that when you start your race, you're starting from an abundance of oxygen and the lowest level of CO2 possible. So that as these start to shift, you're starting from an advantageous point to where you can have more of that shift before you shut down. Okay, now to maximize your oxygen, we want to use a breathing technique that is called the Wim Hof breathing technique. You might have heard of this guy, Wim Hof. If not, check him out on YouTube, read his books, really cool guy. But there's a kind of breathing where you can increase the amount of oxygen stored in your body. I'm not going to go into it in depth here because I have trainings on it that you can watch and follow through and go through this in real time. But essentially, what you do is you breathe in very deeply, very fully, and then you let it go. You relax, you don't push it out. You just all the way in, let it go. And you repeat this. And you do it about 30 times. Now at the end of 30, you're going to breathe out all the way to the bottom. Hold your breath. Then breathe in fully, hold your breath. There's some nuances to this, but that's essentially a round of Wim Hof breathing style. And you're going to repeat that 3 to 4 times. And when you do this, you're storing up more oxygen in your body. A quick little fun fact is also, not only are you storing more oxygen, but you're also triggering the release of adrenaline in your body. And that's going to help your running as well in the short distances. So Wim Hof breathing. Then when you get to the end of your Wim Hof breathing, where you're storing up more oxygen, you're going to purge the CO2. Now, this is a technique that I learned from David Blaine, the magician and the stunt guy who does amazing feats of endurance. Now, he did this one exhibition where he held on to a bunch of balloons and he rode up into the sky and he went really high and then he parachuted down. Now, when he was training for this, he had to learn how to not pass out. When you go higher and higher and higher, there's less partial pressure of oxygen. And so you're getting less oxygen and building up more CO2, and people sometimes will black out when they go higher and higher in elevation. So he trained himself not to do this. And in fact, on his documentary, he put a pulse oximeter on his finger, and he would do trainings where he'd go up in planes really high, and he was able to maintain his blood oxygen levels when everybody else around him was losing blood oxygen levels. How'd he do it? In part, he used this Wim Hof breathing technique, but then you want to get rid of the CO2. And the way you do that is forceful exhalation. So you're going to put your tongue at the back of your top 2 teeth, and you're going to sort of make a snake hissing kind of noise. And you're going to use your abdominal muscles to push the air out all the way to the bottom. And you're going to do rounds of this as well. Now, at the very end of our training here together, I'm going to share with you the order of operations about how to cool your palms, how to use your breath, and what times to do it before the gun goes off. But now let's jump into number 3. The third thing that you can do on race day is a harder warm-up. Now, there's an idea in running that a lot of people have, that you have a gas tank and you want to conserve all of the fuel in that gas tank so you can burn it all up during your race. But that's not true. You never run out of gas. You can always keep going. You just might go slower. So before a 5K, it would be a mistake to just lay around and try to conserve your energy so that you have it all for your race. No, we don't want to do that. You're not going to run out of energy. You're not even going to run out of glycogen. It'll take you about 90 minutes or even 2 hours to run out of glycogen when you're running. Not 15, 20, 25, 30 minutes, whatever it takes to do a 5K. So I want you to embrace doing a harder warm-up. Now, here's the formula for a harder warm-up. I want you to go a mile or 2 nice and easy, because it takes about 7 minutes for, once you put a new stimulus on your body, to neurologically warm up, to start delivering more blood flow. You ever do a triathlon and when you get off the bike and start running, it really hurts, it really sucks in your legs, it feels bad? It's not because you're not warmed up. You just swam and biked for maybe hours. But you're not neuromuscularly warmed up for the demands of running. So your legs feel like crap. Same thing for a 5K. We don't want to go from just easy jogging to running fast for a 5K. We want to get our body warmed up to run fast. So what I suggest is you do 1 to 2 miles of easy running, get yourself generally warmed up. And then don't be afraid to warm up harder. So what I recommend is 5 to 10 100-meter strides that are done at about mile to 5K race pace. Now, these are not going to tire you out because they're only 100 meters. And then you're going to stop and take a break after each one. But we're neuromuscularly warming your body up. And then I want you to do some metabolic warming up. So I want you to run at about 5K pace, or if you're running at 10K, you can run at 10K pace, but race pace for maybe a couple of 200-meter intervals and maybe even a 400-meter interval. So what this might look like for your 5K is 2 miles of easy running, 5 to 10 100-meter strides with a full break between, and then either 3 by 200 or perhaps 1 or 2 by 400 at race pace. Okay, now the order that you do these 3 hacks that I've shared with you matters. Of course, what I want you to do is warm up first. So you can begin your warm up as early before your race as you like. Let's call it 20 to 30 minutes before the gun goes off. And you're gonna do your easy running, your strides, and your intervals. Now the problem is, I just told you that I want you to warm up, but I also told you that I don't want your local muscle temperature to go up. So these kind of conflict with each other. Here's how you deal with it. We do your warm up first, then you come back and you do your palmar cooling. You can do this with cool water, or you can, if you want to get fancy, you can buy a device to do this. You don't need to, just use cool water. And then you're going to do Wim Hof breathing, and then you're going to finish with CO2 purge breathing. And by the time you get done with all of that, you might be 5 to 10 minutes before the gun goes off. At which point, you're just going to stay nice and limber by doing some light jogging around. And right before the gun goes off, you can do 1 more round of Wim Hof breathing and a little bit of CO2 purge breathing. Some of these things might sound like they're kind of out there, but they're really not. You're doing these things already. Think about it. When you go to run hard intervals, or when you're in a race, you're actually doing something like CO2 purge breathing already. When you're at the end of a race, aren't you exhaling forcefully? You're forcing the exhalation. You're not just letting it go. You're trying to get the CO2 out. Your body already knows this. Our bodies are smart. Your body doesn't want to overheat, and it doesn't want to get exhausted from CO2 and pass out. You might be running away from a lion or a tiger or something like that, and you need to keep going. So your body already knows to do these things, and you're doing them already. But if we consciously put some effort into doing them before we need to do them, we can shift the balance in our favor, and you can go a little bit faster for a little bit longer. Now, the final hack for you is something that you're not going to do right before the race. All of these things I've shared with you, you can do on race day. But in the days and the weeks leading up to your race, the other thing that you can do is you can tune up your muscle tension. Now, muscular tension is basically the amount of elastic recoil that you have in your tendons and in your muscles. So if you jump up and down like on a pogo stick, it doesn't take that much muscular contraction to do it. We're really relying on the elastic recoil of our Achilles tendon, of our calf muscles, and a little bit in our plantar fascia. So this is free energy that you get. Now, when you run a marathon or an ultra, you actually don't want to have high muscular tension. You want to be a little bit low muscle tension. And Bill Rogers used to talk about this. Bill Rogers said that when he was nice and light and bouncy, he could run a fast 5K, but when he was in peak shape to set a world record in the marathon, he could barely even jump off the ground. So in a long distance, you want to have low muscle tension, but in a short distance, you want to be very bouncy and get that free elastic recoil. Now you can train this through something you've heard of before, and that's plyometric training. Plyometric training would be like what I was just doing, jumping up and down like that. Now you can do bounding or skipping or jumping or depth jumps off of a box, or one-legged jumping up and down a stair, or jump rope, anything like this that really tightens up the muscular tension and maximizes our elastic return. Now, it'll take you a little bit of time to build this up, but you can do it relatively quickly. You can do it much more quickly than you could increase your VO2 max or just get more fit as a 5K runner. You can do this in the 2 to 3 weeks leading up to your race. It's really important not to do plyometric training if you're not already strong, or if you have an injury like a plantar fasciitis or an Achilles tendonitis. Maybe don't do it. But if you're healthy, you've been training well, then you can add in some of these plyometric activities. And you see elite runners using plyometrics all the time. Watch any training video on Galen Rupp, Dathan Ritzenheim. Pick your favorite track runner and just look at what they're doing in their training. They're probably not just on the track. They're also in the weight room and they're doing exercises. And those exercises are oftentimes explosive and bouncy. And that's what they're doing. They're tuning up this muscular tension. So I hope that you really enjoyed learning these 4 hacks that you can use to instantly improve your 5K or any short distance from really the 800 meters or the sprints all the way up to the 5K and the 10K. Try these out. These work exceptionally well. If you want to learn more about these techniques, I have a video here on palmar cooling, and I have a video here on Wim Hof breathing, and I have a video here on CO2 purging. You can read about these in the Run Elite book as well. If you haven't heard of the Run Elite book, it's doing exceptionally well on Amazon right now. Just read the reviews. You're gonna love this. Pick up your copy. You can get it on audio as well. I recorded the audio myself. I hope I did a really good job on that. It's entertaining, it's fun, and it's a cheap way to learn these hacks and more at a deep level so you can improve your race, be it from the 1500 meters to the marathon and beyond to the ultras. This has been Andrew Snow with Run Elite here at beautiful Jump Off Rock in Hendersonville, North Carolina. I hope you have a great day. I'll see you on the next video.